Attorney General Eric Schneiderman unveiled new reporting regulations for nonprofits. This is in response to the flood of outside money that has poured into elections since the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision, and is specifically aimed at getting 501c4 social welfare groups that engage in electioneering to reveal their donors. But my next guest suggests that Schneiderman is the one making it all about politics. Matt Walter is the State Government Leadership Foundation spokesman. Matt, thanks very much for joining us this evening.
Nick, pleasure to be with you.
So you are taking issue with these new regulations that Schneiderman announced this week, essentially saying that they may run afoul of some constitutional grounds here.
Indeed, and in fact this is actually an outrage and has shades of what we're seeing in Washington, D.C. as it relates to IRS and the media, where you have government overreaching, and that what it's going to do is have a chill on people's rights to free speech.
Well, how does it have a chill on people's right to free speech? I mean, I know we've heard that argument before from advocates of keeping some of this disclosure stuff out of the public view, mainly because they're worried that people would, not want to donate to some groups if they knew their names were going to be out there. But if they're trying to influence public policy and public elections, why not put your name on it?
Well, you hit on the point that people have argued, and the Supreme Court has accepted that argument time and time again. One of the earliest examples of that in the 1950s was the NAACP versus Alabama, where the Alabama Attorney General wanted to force the NAACP to disclose their list of donors. Supreme Court decided unanimously that that was unconstitutional and not acceptable, and the rights to free speech and spending your resources to advocate for the positions or candidates of your choice have been upheld by the Supreme Court since that time, before and after. There's a reason that freedom of speech is #1 in the Bill of Rights.
Well, I guess to be clear, what the Attorney General is trying to do here is that it's seeking itemized donations for certain groups that are performing political activity, and if you donate to a group that is engaging in political activity, that will be disclosed. But if you're donating to a segregated fund in one organization and that fund is not being spent on political activity, then your name will not be released. There are certain exceptions and certain waivers. And there's also a waiver in there if your group is engaging in political speech or political activity that beyond, with a certainly reasonable expectation that you could have the fear of or threats based on your activity in that you could apply for a waiver and it would not be disclosed. Do you think that's a strong enough protection in there?
Absolutely not. You can't have an entity like this trying to work around the Supreme Court, which is really, at the launching of this, what was kind of acknowledged, and then throughout the process having it acknowledged that this was going to be subject to challenge, and for good reason. They know it's going to be subject to challenge because it's patently unconstitutional. You can try and slice this and dice this based on where it is in relation to an election, based on what the individual in the AG's seat feels is political activity or not political activity. But there are two problems here. The first one is the process, simply implementing these regulations without running it through a duly elected deliberative body, and just inviting people that are going to say what you want them to say is not a deliberative body. That's not the appropriate angle or avenue to pursue that. And at the same time, the actual regulations as overseen by the AG are subject to the same type of overreach and political manipulation that we're seeing and have seen throughout history time and time again, most recently with the IRS scandal and with the Obama administration's treatment of the free press. It's fundamentally un-American.
I guess I don't see the connection between how the IRS was going after Tea Party groups or how the Obama administration is necessarily surveilling on journalists. I mean, this is political speech, and I would guess that advocates of disclosure are saying that this is primarily about accountability. If you're going to make a claim in the public arena about a political cause or a political candidate, the source of how that claim is being funded and disseminated widely to a group of people, to a group of voters, should be made known. So what exactly is the connection between the IRS and the surveillance of journalists at the AP to this issue?
Sure. Well, the comparison there is what you have is a series of governmental organizations who are making the determination of who they're going to investigate, when, and where. And those rights of taxation and prosecution are some of the greatest compulsory elements that government has. While you certainly need some regulation and oversight, what you've got here is a pure political move by the Attorney General. The right to form organization, be parts of organizations, and contribute in a fashion that allows you to do so free from reprisals has been upheld by the Supreme Court time and time again. And so essentially what you see the Attorney General doing here, and there are shades of it with the IRS and with the media, is a governmental entity that is acting solely to root out people who think differently than them, even though it's acknowledged from the offset that does not jive with the opinion of the Supreme Court and multiple Supreme Court.
Schneiderman, the Attorney General is a Democrat, and I think he's certainly, I think it's fair to characterize him as a liberal Democrat, but how do we know specifically that this is going to be targeting conservative groups? I would imagine that, you know, you could have any number of groups that could be a part of this new disclosure reg. I mean, I've been talking to some good government organizations that were, you know, perhaps a little concerned about this, who agree with Schneiderman that more disclosure is needed, but they would have to disclose under some of this as well, and maybe have thought it's taking a little too far. So, what evidence do you have that this is actually going to be used to act out a political reprisal?
It's been a common conversation in the mainstream media that this is being done to advance his national stature. As far as actual evidence of who the Attorney General has focused on thus far based on their ideological leanings, make a great subject of a FOIL request. We'd like to see that. We'd like to know who these groups are that the AG is looking into. Is it all above board? Because when you put all that power in the hands of one person, and let's note for a second here that this is oversight of charities, and the fundamental oversight of the AG's Office of Charitable Organizations has been to root out fraud and corruption. This is an extreme departure from the historical rights and responsibilities of the AG's office. And why is he doing it now? Why is that?
Are you asking me? Well, I mean, I think
I'm asking you. I'm asking the viewers to think about that.
I would say
why
though,
this
that the
extreme
Attorney
departure?
General. Yeah, I would say though that the Attorney General's office has certainly had broadened powers and expanded powers. You know, and we can date that back to Elliot Spitzer, and certainly Andrew Cuomo used those powers as well. But this is primarily concerning New York-based groups that are playing out political activity here. Obviously, the Supreme Court would take some sort of precedence here. But I guess since these regulations are just being now put into place, what exactly do you think is ultimately going to happen here? Do you think there'll be less money flowing to some of these groups, less of these organizations that are taking hold? Because we saw a tremendous amount of political activity in 2012 in New York in state legislative races. Pour money in and try to influence the outcome here. So do you think we'll see a reversal of that in 2014?
Well, let me just touch on one point that you said, which was that the Supreme Court may have some oversight. They absolutely do have oversight. Fundamental principle of democracy, freedom of speech. And that freedom of speech, as protected by the Supreme Court, yes, has opened up individuals of all sizes and backgrounds, shapes, their income levels to get more engaged in the political process. How is that an unhealthy thing? How is that something that the Attorney General should be expanding those powers? And it's for another show and a longer show to talk about whether Elliot Spitzer and some other AGs have used those expanded powers in a responsible way or not. But certainly in this case, this is a departure that we feel from the offset is in direct opposition to the Supreme Court. And so it's wrong-headed from the very beginning.
I guess what I'm asking is, do you think some of these organizations are going to be taking a hit in their wallet because of these regulations? Do you think less money is going to go to them?
I think that, yeah, I think that's absolutely going to be the case, because you're going to put what it is a chill on public speech. It's a chill on free speech, and it's going to be a chill on political discourse. And ultimately, the only person that helps is the incumbent.
All righty, Matt.